You know what stopped me in my tracks a few years back? I was visiting Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, driving past these beautiful Amish gardens. I mean rows and rows of tomatoes, beans, squash, all lush, all thriving, and it hit me. There was not a single hose in sight, no sprinkler heads popping up out of the ground, no drip lines running between the beds, no timers, no faucet splitters, nothing. Just healthy plants and quiet soil. And I thought, how on earth are they watering all of this? Because I've been gardening for over 30 years, and I can't go 3 days in July without dragging a hose across my yard. These families are producing serious harvests without any of the equipment I thought was essential. That stuck with me. And when I started digging into how they actually do it, what I found changed how I water my garden to this day. So today I'm going to walk you through exactly how Amish families water their gardens without hoses, without irrigation systems, and without a single connection to a municipal water line. And stick around to the end because I'll share one technique they use involving nothing more than a kitchen scrap that keeps their soil holding moisture for days longer than you'd expect. I'll be honest with you, for most of my gardening life, I was a hose guy. I had the expandable hose, the sprinkler on a timer, the whole setup, and it worked fine, or at least I thought it did. But when I started looking at how Amish communities approach water in the garden, I realized I'd been solving a problem they never created in the first place. They don't need fancy irrigation because they design their gardens so that water does most of the work on its own. That's not about going without, that's about thinking ahead. And once I understood that, I started making changes in my own backyard that saved me time, money, and a whole lot of frustration during dry spells. Here's the thing about the Amish approach to gardening that most people misunderstand. People hear no hoses, no irrigation, and they picture deprivation. They imagine someone hauling bucket after bucket across a field in the blazing sun. But that's not what's happening at all. The Amish live by a set of community guidelines they call the Ordnung, O-R-D-Nung, and at the heart of those guidelines is a commitment to self-sufficiency. They don't avoid modern tools because they enjoy making life harder. They avoid dependency on systems they can't control. And when you apply that thinking to a garden, something interesting happens. You stop asking, how do I get more water to my plants? And you start asking, how do I design my garden so it needs less water in the first place? That shift in thinking is where all of this begins. And what's remarkable is that the science completely backs it up. Root zone watering, moisture retentive soil, gravity-fed delivery. These aren't old-fashioned workarounds. They're genuinely more efficient than what most of us do with a hose and a sprinkler timer. The plants get more of what they need and less water gets wasted. Let me show you how this works step by step. The first thing Amish gardeners do differently starts before a single seed goes into the ground. They think about where water naturally wants to go on their property and they put their garden beds in that path. Most of us pick our garden spot based on sunlight, which is important, but the Amish factor in slope, drainage, and how rainfall moves across the land. Even a very slight grade, just a few inches of drop over 20 or 30 feet, is enough to direct water toward your beds instead of away from them. If your yard has a gentle low spot where water tends to collect after rain, that's not a problem area. That's a garden location. Now, I'm not saying plant in a swamp. Standing water will rot roots faster than drought will wilt them, but a spot where moisture naturally gathers and then slowly drains, that's ideal. In Amish settlements, you'll often see garden beds oriented perpendicular to the slope, running across the grade rather than up and down. This does something simple but powerful. Each bed acts like a tiny terrace, catching water as it moves downhill and giving it time to soak in rather than running off. You can do this in your own yard with nothing more than a rake and a level. Lay a 4-foot level across the ground and see which way the bubble moves. Orient your rows across that slope. If your yard is dead flat, you can actually create a very slight berm on the downhill side of each bed, just 2 to 3 inches high, using the soil you'd normally push aside when forming your rows. That small lip holds rainwater right where your plants need it. I started doing this about 4 years ago, and the difference during summer storm was noticeable almost immediately. Instead of watching water sheet across my garden and pool at the fence line, it was soaking into each bed. The second piece of the Amish watering system is rain collection, and it's simpler than most people think. A standard rain barrel holds about 50 to 55 gallons. That sounds like a lot, but here's the number that really matters. For every 1 inch of rain that falls on 1,000 square feet of roof, you collect roughly 600 gallons of water. Most houses have at least that much roof surface, draining toward a single downspout. So even a modest rain event fills a barrel quickly. The Amish typically position barrels at multiple downspouts, and they connect them in series, so when one barrel fills, the overflow feeds into the next. You don't need anything fancy for this. A standard 55-gallon food-grade drum, a screen on top to keep debris and mosquitoes out, and a spigot near the bottom. The whole setup can cost less than $40 per barrel if you source the drums from a local food distributor or farm supply store. One important thing to check before you set this up: rain barrel legality varies by state. Most states allow residential rain collection without any restrictions, but a few, mostly in the arid West, have regulations on how much you can capture. A quick search for your state's rules will clear that up in about 2 minutes. Now, here's where most people stop. They set up a rain barrel and then stand there with a watering can, filling it up and carrying it back and forth, and that works. The Amish absolutely do hand carry water with cans, especially for smaller kitchen gardens, but for anything larger than a few raised beds, they take it one step further, and that's what we'll cover next. This is the step that really opened my eyes. Instead of carrying water from the barrel to the garden, the Amish let gravity do the carrying. If you elevate your rain barrel 3 to 4 feet off the ground, you create enough water pressure to feed a simple drip system without any pump, without any electricity, and without any connection to your house plumbing. All you need is a platform. Cinder. Blocks stacked 2 or 3 high work perfectly. A sturdy wooden stand works too, but make sure it can handle the weight. A full 55-gallon barrel weighs about 460 pounds, so this is not a job for a flimsy table. Attach a spigot at the base of the barrel, connect a standard garden valve and run a soaker line or a perforated hose along the base of your garden rows. When you open that valve, gravity pulls water down and out through the line at a slow, steady rate. It's not high pressure. You're not going to run a sprinkler off of this, but that's actually the point. This slow delivery puts water exactly where it needs to go, right at the soil surface, right at the root zone, with almost zero evaporation loss. A conventional sprinkler can lose 30 to 50% of its water to evaporation and wind drift before it ever reaches the soil. A gravity-fed soaker line loses almost nothing. I set up my first gravity barrel system 5 years ago, and I'll tell you, it felt almost too simple. I kept expecting it not to work, but that first summer, my tomato rows got consistent, deep moisture without me touching a thing on days I'd normally be out there wrestling with a hose. The flow rate is slower. Yes, it takes longer to deliver the same volume, but the plants don't care about speed. They care about consistency, and this delivers. If you're finding value in learning how the Amish approach something as basic as water, take a second to subscribe. I've been exploring these traditional methods, and there's a lot more to share. Now let's keep going. Here's a mistake I made for years, and I bet you've made it too. I used to stand over my garden with a hose and water from above, spraying the leaves, the stems, the flowers, everything. It looked thorough. It felt productive. But the Amish would watch that and shake their heads because they know something most of us had to learn the hard way. Water belongs on the soil, not on the plant. When you water from overhead, several bad things happen at once. First, a huge amount of that water evaporates before it ever reaches the ground, especially on a hot afternoon. Second, wet foliage is an invitation for fungal diseases, blight, a powdery mildew, leaf spot. These all thrive on leaves that stay damp. Third, water that hits the soil surface hard from above tends to run off rather than soak in, especially if your soil has any clay content at all. Amish gardeners water at the base of the plant, right at the soil line. Whether they're using a hand-carried watering can or a gravity-fed soaker line, the water goes low and slow. They tip the can gently at the base of each plant and let it soak in before moving to the next one. It's unhurried, it's deliberate, and it works dramatically better than anything I was doing with the spray nozzle. Here's a simple test you can do tomorrow morning. Water one row from overhead the way most of us do. Water the next row at the soil line slowly, letting each pore soak in before adding more. Then wait 2 hours and stick your finger into the soil about 2 inches deep in both rows. The overhead row will likely be dry just below the surface. The soil level row will still be moist down where the roots actually live. That's the difference. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The best time to water this way is early morning, ideally within the first hour or two after sunrise. The air is cool, the wind is calm, and evaporation is at its lowest point of the day. Amish families are up early anyway, and the garden gets watered before the heat of the day has a chance to steal any of it. If morning doesn't work for your schedule, late evening is your second best option, but morning is better because it gives foliage that might accidentally get splashed a full day to dry out, reducing disease pressure. One more thing on timing. The Amish don't water on a schedule. They water based on what the soil tells them. Stick your finger into the ground about 2 inches deep. If it feels dry at that depth, depth, it's time to water. If there's still moisture down there, leave it alone. Your plants will actually develop deeper, stronger root systems if you let the top inch dry out between waterings. Shallow, frequent watering trains roots to stay near the surface where they're vulnerable to heat and drought. Deep, less frequent watering trains them to reach down for moisture, which makes the whole plant more resilient. The Amish understand this intuitively because they've been watching it work for generations. Now let's talk about the part of the system that ties everything together. And honestly, this might be the most important step of all. You can capture rainwater, you can deliver it by gravity, you can water at the soil line perfectly, but if your soil can't hold on to that moisture, you're still fighting an uphill battle. This is where Amish gardens have a huge advantage, and it has everything to do with how they build their soil over time. Amish families compost heavily. Kitchen scraps, animal manure, crop residue, leaves. It all goes back into the soil year after year, generation after generation. Some of these garden plots have been worked and amended continuously for over 100 years. That kind of sustained organic matter does something remarkable to soil structure. It creates what soil scientists call aggregation, where soil particles clump together with tiny air pockets between them. Those pockets act like a sponge. They absorb water when it's available and hold on to it slowly, releasing it to plant roots over days rather than hours. You can start building this kind of soil in your own garden right now. Work 2 to 3 inches of finished compost into the top 6 to 8 inches of your beds each spring. If you don't make your own compost yet, bagged compost from a garden center works fine to get started, but start a pile. The Amish don't buy compost. They make it from what's already on hand, and you can too. On top of that compost-enriched soil, add 3 to 4 inches of organic mulch. Straw is the classic Amish choice. It's cheap, it breaks down slowly, and it does triple duty. It shades the soil from direct sun, which reduces evaporation. It insulates the soil, keeping roots cooler in summer and warmer during cold snaps. And as it decomposes over the season, it adds even more organic matter back into the ground. Shredded leaves, grass clippings, and wood chips all work too, though wood chips are better suited for pathways and perennial beds than annual vegetable rows. Here's the payoff. A garden bed with 6 to 8 inches of compost amended soil and 3 to 4 inches of mulch on top can hold moisture 3 to 4 times longer than bare, unamended soil. That means on a week when you'd normally water 3 or 4 times, that you might only need to water once. That's not a guess. That's what I've experienced in my own garden since I started following this approach. And it lines up with what soil science research has shown about organic matter and water retention. Let me share some patterns I've noticed between conventional watering and how the Amish handle it. I did most of these myself for years, so there's no judgment here, just some observations that might save you time and water. The first pattern is overhead watering. Most of us were taught to set up a sprinkler and let it run. It covers a big area and feels efficient, but the Amish approach of watering at the soil line delivers more water to the roots with less waste. The difference I noticed in my own garden was fewer fungal problems and lower water usage overall. The second pattern is watering on a timer. We set it and forget it, which is convenient, but the Amish water based on what the soil actually needs, not what a clock says. Some weeks your garden needs water every 3 days. Other weeks, after a good rain, it doesn't need any for a week or more. A timer can't read your soil. Your finger can. The third pattern is bare soil between plants. Most conventional gardens leave the soil surface exposed a night. The Amish almost always mulch. That bare soil loses moisture to evaporation all day long, and it crusts over after heavy rain, making it harder for the next watering to penetrate. A layer of straw solves both problems. The fourth pattern is depending entirely on municipal water. When drought restrictions hit, conventional gardens suffer because they're built around a system that can be shut off. An Amish garden with rain barrels, moisture retentive soil, and gravity-fed delivery keeps going because it was never dependent on that system in the first place. After the drought restrictions we had a few summers ago, this was the lesson that really hit home for me. Now here's something I picked up that most gardening books won't mention, and it's almost embarrassingly simple. Amish gardeners bury kitchen scraps directly in their garden beds during the off-season, not in a compost pile right in the bed. They'll dig a trench about 8 to 10 inches deep between where next year's rows will go, fill it with vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, and then cover it back up with soil. Over the winter, that material breaks down right in place. By spring, the soil in that area is darker, softer, and holds moisture noticeably better than the surrounding ground. I've been doing this for 3 winters now, and the rows where I buried scraps the previous fall are always the last to dry out during summer heat. The biology behind it is straightforward. Decomposing organic matter feeds soil microbes and earthworms, which create channels and pore spaces that hold water. It's essentially composting in place, and it concentrates the benefit exactly where your plants will be growing. Dig your trench in late fall after you've cleared your summer crops. Fill it over the winter as scraps accumulate. Cover it up by early spring and plant right alongside it. By midsummer, you'll feel the difference in that soil with your bare hands. That's what I've learned from watching how the Amish approach something as basic as watering a garden. No pumps, no timers, no pressurized systems, just gravity, rainfall, good soil, and a little bit of patience. If any of this changed how you think about water in your garden, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into how traditional communities grow food with methods that have worked for generations. Thanks for spending time with me today. You know, the thing that stuck with me most about the Amish approach isn't any single technique, it's the mindset. They don't fight nature. They don't try to overpower dry spell with more equipment and higher water bills. They set things up so that nature does most of the heavy lifting, and then they step in with a watering can when the soil asks for a little help. After 30 years of dragging hoses, I can tell you that this quieter way of doing things has been one of the best changes I've ever made in my garden. Give it a try this season and see for yourself. I'll see you in the next one.